Hello and welcome attendees of Global Veg Fest. My name is Philip Murphy and I'm streaming in from the greater New York City metro area. I'm happy to be here at this wonderful event. And today I'd like to lead the group in a little bit of a discussion or a conversation about mindfulness meditation practice, what it is and what it isn't, and how it can be useful to us as vegans navigating in a speciesist world and as vegan activists to advance an anti-speciesist imperative in our speciesist community. So thank you all again. My name is Philip Murphy and I am the founder of ADASA, and that stands for Anti-Speciesist Ahimsa Dharma Anti-Speciesist Action, which is a pan-dharmic anti-speciesist organization that I'm launching to bring, specifically to bring the vegan imperative to dharmic communities, pan-dharmic, all of these religions, Buddhism, Hindu, Jain, yoga, that have the practice of ahimsa or dynamic harmlessness in common. And I'm also interested in having these simple meditation practice, simple versions of these meditation practice available to support vegans and vegan activists in their work in the world. So let me first say thank you to Tim Barford, to Pete in IT, to all the folks who helped make this conference possible. You know, it's one of the great resources in the global vegan community, and I hope you appreciate it as I do and take full advantage of the wonderful programs that Global Veg Fest presents here online, and we'll be back again in mid-December. Looking forward to that. So I also want to begin by thanking each and every one of you for your work in advancing veganism in this, you know, cultural speciesist world. It's a very difficult thing to be a vegan. And I say that because I just want to acknowledge that it's a difficult thing. It can feel alienating. It can feel demoralizing. And at the same time, affirming when we see the light go on when they begin to adopt veganism, when they see what we see, right? And become vegan. But it's very challenging, and I just want to not take for granted the respect, you know, that I have for everyone who commits to being vegan in a speciesist society. So again, my name is Philip Murphy. I want to share a little bit about my path that includes coming to practicing mindfulness meditation and how that fits into my personal journey and my advocacy today. So in a previous life, I was involved in the entertainment business. I ran an independent rock and roll record label in my hometown of Boston, Massachusetts, here in the States. And I lived a very kind of high energy, exciting life that I don't regret. I enjoyed it very much, but as time passed, I did it for quite a number of years, and I came to a place where I realized that this was not sustaining me in the way that it had the excitement of bringing this wonderful music. There was a great community in Boston that we brought to the world through the records that we produced on this label. And I came to a place where, you know, the life that's associated with operating in those spaces was not supporting me in the way that I wanted to be in the world. And I made a decision to leave that world. And at that time, that involved getting sober for me, because the lifestyle associated with that community can be very challenging. There's a lot of alcohol and drugs are a big part of that, or can be a very big part of that world. And that was that was no longer serving me in the way that I wanted it to. And at that time, I came to practice meditation. I was brought to a center in Cambridge, Massachusetts. That's one of the preeminent non-residential urban centers in the US, called the Cambridge Incite Meditation Society. And I began to practice meditation in the Buddhist tradition, Theravada Buddhism. So on that note, I just want to say we're going to do a period of practice later, and while it derives from Buddhism, this is not a specifically Buddhist practice that I'm just going to be leading. It's really secular and applicable to anyone in any orientation or any belief system. One doesn't have to be a Buddhist to practice mindfulness meditation. And at that same time, literally co-concurring, was my exposure to the violence of the so-called animal agriculture industry. And that was in the form of what has become the Boston Vegan Festival at that time. It was a small group of people with folding card tables set up on the edge of the Boston Common, and they were handing out flyers. They had flyers on these tables. They were handing them out and talking to people walking by. And one of these individuals, and I'll be forever grateful, kind of caught my eye and said, are you aware of what goes on in the so-called animal agriculture industry? I have some information if you are interested. And of course, on some level, like everyone, I knew that animals were killed for flesh, the consumption of flesh. I just didn't think about it. And I continued on my way because in our society, this is considered normal. And when I saw those images, I could feel my heart open. I identified, I empathized with those individuals. And from that moment, I no longer consumed animal flesh. As I continued to learn about the horrors of the industries that rely on deriving animal secretions, so eggs and dairy, honey, in the food sector, and then beyond that, how animals were exploited for entertainment, for clothing. So over time, I came to a place where I adopted a commitment to non-harming, to veganism, to the extent that it's possible and practical in our world, and I maintain that practice to this day. So before we start to talk a little bit more about mindfulness meditation and then do some practice, I want to first say what to my mind mindfulness meditation is not. And by that I mean it's not a relaxation technique. It's not stress reduction, or these aren't the primary goals. They can be benefits, byproducts, if you will, of the practice. But essentially, meditation is a way to slow down and stop and look into the nature of existence. See where I'm being in the world in accordance with the reality of the situation, and where I'm not. And where I'm not is frankly the source of suffering, of delusion, confusion, from which stem the decisions that lead me to places that I don't feel are serving me or positioning me to be in the world that I want, in the way that I want to be. And in this context, as a impactful a vegan activist as I can be. So what meditation is, in my experience, and the way we're going to be talking about it and practicing, is gaining insight into the nature of human existence. And by that, I will use a framing from Buddhism. Again, not Buddhist practice. You don't have to be a Buddhist. But in Buddhism, they talk about the two truths. So relative truth and absolute truth. So relative truth is the way, from relative truth, we operate in the world in normal states of consciousness. I'm here. I decide I want to raise my hand. I send a signal to my hand from my brain, and I raise my hand. I'm looking into the camera. I'm speaking to you. I have a sense of myself as being the author and the actor in this context, in this being in the world. And that's perfectly reasonable and fine, and it's effective. It's how we, as embodied human beings, need to assume these identities in order to be effective and be in the world. But the absolute truth of the matter is a very different thing. So in absolute truths, in Buddhism, they have a framing talking about the three characteristics of existence. And that's impermanence. I'll use the English term. So impermanence, nothing is permanent. Things are always changing. That's an absolute truth. From a human perspective, there's an element of unsatisfactoriness or dissatisfaction that's built into human existence. And that's not to say that Buddhism or life needs to be pessimistic or negative. It's just acknowledging the reality that by being an embodied human being, there's a lot of wonderful things that come from that and opportunities, but intrinsically there is an element of dissatisfaction. And the third characteristic is not self. So there's not, in absolute truth, there's not any self that persists from moment to moment. We maintain in relative truth the illusion that there's a persisting self in our ability to conceive of the past and the future, and self-consciousness support that notion that allows us to be in the world and be effective agents in the world. But in absolute terms, it's actually not true. So what meditation is a way to see into this truth, to take from it a way of being in the world that minimizes the distortions of how we show up, and consequently how we can be more engaged and effective in the world. So practice is a way to see into this truth. So I want to take some time. We're going to do a bit of practice, and the way, a very simple way, and I will give credit and with profound gratitude to one of my primary teachers, who's an American by the name of Shinzen Young, who created a very accessible pathway. It derives from Buddhism, but it is not Buddhist, called See, Hear, Feel. So this meditation technique is about examining the ways that we experience reality, which is through our sense gates, and noting them at this moment, what sense gate is active at a particular moment, noting that, as a means to see into the fact that what is really going on is my sensory experience is of sight right now, and that can be internal or external, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. And by seeing into the nature of our experience in this way, there's a dramatic reduction in the distress that comes from being an embodied human being that is necessarily has this relative truth from which we must operate, but that there's this nagging sensation like there's more to this. This doesn't seem like that's all there is, right? So this practice is a way, again, to see into the nature of how we experience reality clearly. Derives from a practice in Buddhism called Incite meditation, insight into the nature of reality, from which we can then be more skillful in being in the world. And I think from a vegan activist standpoint, this is incredibly powerful because it allows me to experience the world with less reactivity. There's a difference. So the ability to respond rather than react, and this is crucially important. It's a more accurate insight into the nature of the world and my place in it. It's less distress. And again, I did mention there is benefit from this more appropriate alignment with the nature of existence in a human body. There's less stress. There's less mental chatter that can be distracting and counterproductive to achieving goals in the world. So I want to take some time now to practice using the see, hear, feel technique, and I'll lead us through this. But to start, I'm going to invite people to find a position that you can maintain for a period of time, whether sitting in a chair or in a cushion. Maintain a body position that's relaxed but upright. Align the head over the shoulders. Relax and drop the shoulders. Straighten the spine. Balance the head. And just find a way to balance the body using the least amount of muscle power, as muscles get tired and achy over time, and that is why people will move. So we're going to try and remain still but not rigid while we practice. So we'll start by spending some time developing concentration in order to do the technique. So we'll do that with a breath counting strategy. So I'll lead us. We're going to be counting from 1 to 5 and back down to 1, just on the out breath, noting the in breath, and then counting up to 5 and down to 1. So I'll do a little to get us going. So exhale on the out breath, 1. Follow the sensations of the in breath. Exhale, 2. Follow the sensations of the in breath. Exhale, 3. Follow the sensations of the in breath. Up to 5, down to 1. And I'll come back and lead us into see, hear, feel after a period of developing what's called access concentration through breath awareness. If you lose the count, it's perfectly fine. It's the purpose of the count is to catch when we remove and wander from the breath and return. If you have to do it over and over, it's no problem at all. Simply note thinking, whatever was distracting, and return to the breath and to the count. Okay, let's drop the breath counting strategy and we'll begin practicing see, hear, feel. I'll do a little to model the practice. So we're going to break down experience into the 3 sense gates of seeing, auditory, hearing, seeing, visual, hearing, auditory, and feeling the felt sense of the body in space. So I'll do a little to model. Hear, see, feel, see, So we'll begin to practice using this technique. And again, if your mind wanders off to thinking, it's not a problem. This is what the human mind does. We bring it back to the practice unjudgmentally and quietly begin to practice again. labeling visual experience see, labeling audio experience hear, labeling the felt sense feel. We do this, we experience absolute reality more closely and consistently, and we gain insight into how our mind creates conceptual reality and how there can be distortions that impact our view of the world and consequently our way of being in it. See, hear, feel. I invite you all to begin to conclude the meditation practice. I'll pause, and at the sound of my voice, we'll have concluded the practice, and I'll offer some closing comments before we wrap our session. So, thank you all for participating here. I hope that this practice was useful to you and that is something that you can utilize as a tool to be a better vegan activist. A couple of brief comments. So I titled this panel Insight to Incite, INCITE in the case of the latter. And first I'll acknowledge it's a nod to my great friend and preeminent Buddhist scholar, Glenn Wallace, who has created a seminar series available online if you go to inciteseminars.org about academic content outside of the academy aimed at creating social change through knowledge and community. And again, Incite, INSIGHT, is the practice of meditation in which we see into the nature of reality more clearly. We're able to draw from that knowledge to be more skillful in the world. And a couple of comments with regard to vegan activism specifically. I can speak from experience in that knowing what I do know of the horrors of the way that in a speciesist society that we exploit other animals, for we are animals as well. It can give rise to anger and frustration that the world hasn't and cannot see what I see. By drawing on practice, I'm able to see more clearly that's my conceptual reality, particularly with regard to my interactions with someone with whom I might be speaking about veganism. And if they're not understanding it, or if they're more often, there's a level of reactivity, which is also another term for the characteristic that I described as unsatisfactoriness, dis-ease. To have some ability to say to myself, this is this person's experience, this is them reacting from their conditioning, which I did for many years of my life as well, before I gained insight into the nature of animal exploitation, right? So it's a way to position myself, to be less reactive, more empathetic and compassionate towards people who have not yet had the experience that I have had, the awakening that we have as vegans into the nature of animal exploitation and how it's normalized in our culture, and to be able to show up to those conversations as skillfully as possible, to carry the message of veganism as effectively as I'm able to, because if I don't do that and I'm frustrated, I allow myself to get frustrated and I blast somebody because they're coming up with some ridiculous argument based on the cognitive dissonance of being presented with this information that we present as vegans to people who have not yet had that insight. If I'm reactive, that's not serving the animals. I might have an opportunity to blast somebody for their irrational view that they're expressing in me, and it might feel good in the moment, but I'm not serving the animals by doing that. because I will alienate people, drive them away. The point is to be present, to not take things being said to me as personally as I might otherwise, by being able to see into the nature of our existence as accurately as possible in order to generate compassion for all sentient beings, including myself. And this does serve as well. I do want to come back to the fact that there is a regenerative function by being more skillfully and more consciously in the world. It does reduce stress. It's a great byproduct. It's not the point of practice. The point is to see clearly and to act skillfully. So I think I'm going to conclude the session here. Again, thank you all for being here, and my heartfelt thanks for your vegan activism in whatever form that takes. It makes me feel like I'm in community. That empowers me in a way that is so meaningful. And I don't want to underestimate the power of community. I had the occasion, the last time VegFest was in person, to come to London and participate. And from that, I have built some great relationships, including with Tim Barford, including with people like Roger Yates, Dan Kidby, other great activists in the London area, and people that came from around the world as well. So hopefully we'll be back in person soon. I would very much welcome the opportunity to be with you all in person in London at VegFest. And please visit on social media, Facebook, Instagram, ADASA, so Ahimsa Dharma, Anti-Speciesist Action. Would love to see you there and offer any feedback. And again, thank you all for your practice and for your advocacy.
Great, that was Philip Murphy, and what a wonderful session to wind up the first Global Veg Fest held over this weekend, September 18th, 19th, 2021. So that's it for this show, except for me to bid everyone farewell. Thank you for listening, but particularly for our participants. We've had some extremely revolutionary and very revealing panels and discussions. I think there's a real clarity there. And I would again just echo what Philip said about solidarity, the community, and the importance now of working together globally, helping each other, listening and learning and becoming better people, and helping ensure that this message, this crucial message of anti-speciesism and the rights for animals not to be used as property becomes the default, and that's some work to do. So on that note, I shall say good night, thank you, and good luck. And just to close before I do, I did hear some good news from Mel recently. Mel Broughton, who, as you know, has been savagely attacked yesterday. He's now at home. He's got a couple of broken ribs, which for Mel, yeah, par for course. Unfortunately, that's not the case for a number of activists who've currently incarcerated around the jail, around the world, and indeed activists who've given their lives for this movement. But it's great to hear that Mel's on the mend. And I would therefore wish you all good well with a very good positive vibe and a good note to end on. And thank you for everyone contributing, especially for you listening. Because if you're still listening at this stage, a real bonus point for you. And that's wonderful. December the 18th, 19th, 2021 is the next one. You can follow us on VegFest. If you do feel like supporting us with a virtual ticket or with a subscription for our online magazines, Force of Vegan and Plant by Planet, we'd very much welcome that support. It goes towards maintaining these free, vegan, rights-based content, panels, debates. They're all free. You can share them, you can use them. If you want to buy my man a coffee here for working like non-stop round the clock to put all this stuff on, days on end, The programme is there. The virtual tickets are online. Go to Buy Me a Coffee, Donor Box. It's all there on the VegFest website. And again, once more, thank you ever so much. And we'll leave you with the warm wishes across the globe. Let's hope for a vegan world before too long. Thank you.